Hi, I'm Gena. Today, I'm going to be walking you through the deep dive data analysis and Quiver course on learn.palantir.com. If you're not yet familiar with Quiver, Quiver is the primary analytical tool for the ontology, and this course is a great place to get started on it. Before we get started, a quick word from our founder.
Discover how Palantir customers unlock more value from Foundry and AIP thanks to our live instructor-led trainings. We are Ontologize, a group of former Palantir engineers who love teaching. We've trained thousands of Palantir users at leading organizations around the world. Unlock the full potential of your Palantir deployment by going to ontologize.com.
Starting out at learn.palantir.com, you're going to navigate to the courses, and then filter for deep dive. And then you'll find Deep Dive, Data Analysis, and Quiver. Make sure you're signed in and that you've registered for this course specifically. First off, we have the course introduction. And so here you'll see an overview about what Quiver is, some key features, a comparison of Quiver versus other tools, when you might want to consider using other tools, and also the Quiver and AIP functionality. Next up, you'll see some instructions for getting help, some permissions and access that you'll need, and then a description of the use case. In this example, we're assuming the role of a data analyst at Titanium Works Manufacturing Company. We'll be using Quiver to carry out the following tasks: performing no-code transformations, visualizing object data, and creating and sharing interactive dashboards. So now let's hit next and take a look at the introduction. And we'll see the introduction where we have a couple more details that you might need to get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a Foundry learning project. Now, if you already have one, you're allowed to skip this step, but if you don't have one, the first thing that we're going to do is make a project together. So now starting from Foundry, you're going to go to Files, and then go to Projects, and then hit New Project, and you'll give your project a name. You can also give it a description if you'd like, and then create project. And now we have our project. So now let's go back to the directions. So now we've completed that step and we can hit next. And so now we're going to create a specific folder within this project. And so we're going to name this folder Deep Dive, Data Analysis, and Quiver. And now we can hit next. So next up, we're going to have to install a marketplace product to get access to the objects that we're going to be doing our analysis on. So from here, you can hit Control-J and search for Marketplace. Now from here, we can open this up in a new tab. So from Marketplace, you're going to search for Quiver. And so here we have Deep Dive, Data Analysis, and Quiver. And you're going to hit Install or Install again. Now, for the location, we're going to use an existing location. Otherwise, it's going to create a new project. And so we're going to hit Use Existing Location. And we're going to navigate to the folder that we just made. And then hit Save. And make sure that you have an ontology selected for the objects. And then hit Next. And so here we can see the content that's going to be installed. Now, make sure that you prefix the ontology entities with some sort of prefix, especially if your colleagues might be doing the same course on your stack. And so I'm going to prefix mine with Gena Learning. And then hit Next. And install. And so now our installation is completed. Let's check out our folder to make sure everything worked. So if I open up this folder, you'll see that there is an installed marketplace product and these two backing data sets. And so everything looks good here. So now back to the course. Let's hit Next. So now we're going to go ahead and make an analysis. So from this folder, you can hit New, and then search for Quiver. So you're going to hit Quiver, and we're going to be calling this one Equipment Analysis, and then give it a save. Now, before we add any data or do any sort of analysis, let's take note that currently we're on the canvas view. The canvas view is a more curated view of your analysis, which allows you to change how the cards are positioned and displayed and sized. And you can also have multiple canvases, kind of like tabs in a browser, whereas the graph view displays the logical flow of your analysis, and we'll be showing that later. So first, let's rename this canvas Parts purity analysis. So the first thing that we're going to do here is add an object to our analysis. So we're going to hit Add Data to Analysis. And it will take us to the Object Types tab, which is where we're going to want to stay. And you're going to search for your object type that you just installed. And so mine is going to be prefixed with Gena Learning. So I'm going to grab Equipment. And here we just added the entire object set. Let's take a step back to look a little bit more at the layout of Quiver. So here, in what looks like a book stack here, you can see your analysis contents, whether you're in the Canvas view or the graph view. Now in this tab here, you're going to add parameters, which is something we'll do later. In this tab, this is where you manage your visual functions. Here is where you manage and create your dashboards. And then we have some global settings for the whole app. So for example, here you can turn on dark mode or change which sort of AIP model you want to use, and a couple of other different configurations. So now let's take a look at this thing on our screen right here. So this is a card. Cards are what we call the building blocks of Quiver. And so every card has its configuration on the right. So if you hit the cog, you'll see the configuration. Now, what's important to keep in mind about cards is that a card in Quiver can take in 0 or more required inputs and produce 0 or more outputs. So the takeaway there is cards may have inputs and outputs. It's important to note that cards will take in a specific data type, and they will also produce a specific data type. And so let's keep that in mind as we move forward. So here, you'll notice that we have this $A. So the $A is the global ID that is assigned to this card, which is how we reference cards in formulas and more. Now, finally, you can rename your cards, and I suggest that as we go forward, you do take note to do this, because it can get confusing if you don't rename your cards. In this case, this is the equipment object set, and it's named accordingly, so no change needed here. And so now that we've gone through the Navigating Quiver's layout section, we're going to move on to data preparation. In data preparation, we're going to do a join between object sets, filter data and implement a parameter, update column values and data types, and we're going to review everything we've done. So from here, we're going to add more data. Remember, we have 2 object types here. We have equipment, which we already have, and we have parts. So we're going to be bringing parts in so we can join it onto equipment. So from here, we're going to go to Add Data and search for your parts object type. And so here I have part, and I just added that. And so now you should have your equipment object table and your parts object table. And so now we're going to join these 2 together. Now note here that this is different than doing a search around. A search around would start with one object type, and we'd end up with a totally different but linked object type. In this case, we're actually going to be doing a join, which is a table-like operation to these object sets. So we're going to select the equipment table, and you'll notice here that it gives us this sort of tag at the bottom that shows us the operations that we can now carry out on this object set. And so from here, you're going to hit transform, and you're going to search for join. And so you're going to select join to transform table. So click on that. Now, what I want to point out here is that this specific card takes in a transform table and produces a transform table. Transform tables allow you to do table-like operations on ontology data, but I do want to note here that the maximum scale here is 50,000 records. So the other thing to point out here is that, again, this operation requires a transform table as an input, and we didn't have a transform table before. We had an object set. But you can see that in pulling up this operation, it already created a transform table for us. And so now we're going to configure a join just like you'd configure a join in any other tool. So the type is going to be a left join. Now we are going to be joining it to parts. And so these are all the current columns that we're keeping from equipment. And now we have to select the columns that we're adding from parts. And so the columns from parts are going to be part ID, part material, part production date, part purity, and part type. And now we have match conditions, of course. And so the match style is going to be all. And so on the input table, which is equipment, we're going to select the join key on that side, which is equipment ID. And then on the incoming table, it's going to be EQ ID. And now let's verify that this worked. Looks like we have incoming data just fine. Now, importantly, let's rename this card because we're going to have several transform tables here, and it can get confusing if you don't rename your cards. So we're going to call this one Equipment Parts Join. And now let's move on. So now that we've finished our join, we're ready to move on. And note that we could add additional transformations here, right in the same transform table. You can string together transformations just like you would in code. But instead, we're going to be making a new transform table for our filters. And so from here, we're going to be starting from the bottom, so it ends up making a new transform table. We're going to hit filter, and then we have the option filter transform table. So we're going to click on that one. And now we're going to add some filters. And so we're going to be keeping rows where the part production date is on or after January 1st, 2024. And now we have our working filter. And so let's rename this transform table here. So we'll call this parts produced after Jan 1st, 2024. So let's keep in mind here that our goal is to put this all into a dashboard where plant managers can drill down depending on their plant. So to do that, we're going to add in a parameter, which will enable better interactivity in the dashboard and will prevent users from overriding each other's filters. So to do that, we're going to navigate to the parameters section, so that little X, and hit create parameter. And it's going to be a selection. So this is going to be a dropdown. And so it's going to be a property value. Now we're going to be getting that property value from equipment. And the property type is going to be the equipment plant. And so now we've added a filter, but let's head over to the graphs. And we can see that this parameter isn't actually doing anything. It's not affecting anything else in the analysis. It comes from equipment, but it's kind of a dead end here. So let's change this. So let's go back to the canvas. And so our next step will be, we're going to go into this filter step, click on the cog, and we're going to add another filter. And we're going to be filtering on equipment plant. Now let's think about what condition this is going to be, because take note here, this is a multi-select, which means instead of something like starts with, we're going to want to check if equipment plant is in an array, because this parameter here is going to produce an array. And so what array are we checking? It's going to be the output from that parameter. And so now let's go to the graph to see what this is doing. So here in the graph, we can see that now the parameter is indeed affecting the transform table. So now we can verify that that has been set up correctly. So now lastly, let's go ahead and rename this transform table to be a little more precise. And so now let's go update the transform table. And we're going to name this filter on equipment, plant, and parts production date. So in order to figure out what's next, let's take a look at this data. So we can see here, we have this string value part purity, which is a P dash and then the value. Now, the problem with this is that this is a string, which means we won't be able to do any interesting numeric operations on it. So to fix this, we're going to have to do some transformation. So first, we're going to extract the P dash here, and then we're going to cast this to a number. So from here, we're going to make a new transform table off the back of this one. So click on this card, and we're going to hit transform. And so we're going to search for find and replace. And the output column name here is going to be purity. Now the input string, we're going to want this to be a variable. And so we're going to select part purity as our input. Now the string that we're searching for is P dash lowercase p, and we're replacing it with nothing. So case insensitive should be false, and use regex should be false. And so now let's take a look. So we can see that the purity now has the P dashes removed. And so now we're going to add a transformation here, and we're going to search for cast. And we're going to search for number to find string to number operation. And so for the output, we're going to call this part purity. And the input, we're going to use a variable input here, is going to be the purity. And so let's take a look at the result of that. So now we have part purity, and it is a number. To get rid of those columns that we now don't need, we're going to go to the display tab, and then we're going to get rid of purity here, which is the string, get rid of that. And also part purity, the original string we started with, get rid of that. And now finally, let's title the table. So we're going to title this update part purity column. Okay, so now let's make sure we save our progress. And then we can take a look at the graph to see what we've done so far. And so if you're zoomed into one table, you can hit zoom to fit to see your entire analysis. And so we can see that we start with the parts object set and also equipment. We go into a transform table. We join them in this transform table. Note also that parts got converted to a transform table in between these two steps. That happened without us explicitly saying so. We have equipment feeding a parameter, and that parameter feeds this filter. And then finally, we have the transform table to clean part purity and cast it to a number. And so now we're going to move on to creating derived columns. So we'll go back to the canvas mode. And next up, we're going to find the average part purity for equipment. So from here, you're clicking on transform, and we're going to search for group by. And so we're going to hit group by, and we're going to be grouping by equipment ID and equipment name. And while you're here, just make sure you get rid of any filters. And you'll notice that the result of our group by is that we get a bunch of array columns. And so for the numbers that we care about, we can handle that by just aggregating those arrays. So from here, we're going to hit add transformation and search for number array aggregation. And so here, we're going to call this output the average purity, and the input array will be the part purity, and we'll keep this as the average. And now lastly, we have this equipment capacity array to deal with. And in this case, this is going to be the same throughout the piece of equipment. And so to get this out of the array form, we're just going to take the first value here. And so from here, we're going to hit add transformation, and we're going to search for array start, and that will take the first value of the array. And the output is going to be called capacity, and the input array here is equipment capacity array. And now we can see we have capacity as a number. So up next, we're going to add a formula that calculates the actual percent output by dividing the count by the capacity. Note that Quiver automatically added a count column when we did our aggregation, so we already have that. And so now we're going to hit add transformation, and we're going to call this one numeric formula. So we're going to name the output column actual percent output. And in the formula, we're going to reference columns by typing the @ symbol. And then we'll see the column names that we have available. So it's going to be count divided by capacity. And then we'll hit update. And then we can see a preview of the output here. And then we can see how this worked out over here. And so lastly, let's go ahead and rename the entire table. So hit the cog. And then we're going to call this aggregated parts summary. So now that we finished our data transformation and adding a new column, we're going to go ahead and add a visual function. So now we're going to add a visual function. So what that entails is we're going to calculate the average part purity, and then we're going to put it all into a visual function so we can reuse it. So to start, we're actually going to select the update part purity column card. And then we're going to hit calculate and hit transform table aggregation, which takes a transform table type and makes it into a number. So we're going to click on this one. So the input table here is update part purity column. The aggregation is the average. The column here is going to be the part purity. And here we have our result. And let's rename this card. We're going to call this average part purity. And so now that we have this, we're going to wrap it up into a visual function so that we or our colleagues can reuse it. And so we're going to navigate to visual functions over here and then hit create new function. And now here is the interface where we'll actually define our function. So we're going to start by defining the function output, which is the average part purity. So that's this one here. So we're going to set this as the output. And now we're going to set the input, which is going to be parts. And so we're going to select parts and then hit this set as input button. And so this has defined our visual function. So now we're going to give it a name. We'll call this Gena average parts purity function, and then hit publish. And now we have created and saved our visual function. And so now this function is available for other people to use on the platform. So now we're going to exit the function creation interface. And now let's test out our function in a new canvas. So from here, we're going to go to the bottom, hit that plus sign, and now we have a new canvas. And now we're going to hit add data to analysis and add the part object type. And then we're going to hit search cards and go to functions. And so here I have my average parts purity function. So I'm going to hit add on this one. And now for the input, it's going to be parts, but note that we have two different parts object sets. We have one on the parts purity analysis, that's this one here, and we have parts on our canvas. Make sure you're using parts from our canvas. And so here we have a result. Now let's toggle on auto update so that in this implementation of the visual function, the function version will update as we get new function versions in. Now, if you want, you can also add some rounding here. So to do that, we'll go to format over here, hit that cog, change this to visual format, and maybe we can set maximum fraction digits to say 3. Up next, we're going to move on to creating some visualizations. So in this section, we'll be creating a number of visualizations to support our analysis, a bar chart, a scatter chart, and a Vega chart. So make sure you go back to our first canvas, which is the parts purity analysis. So we're going to scroll all the way to the bottom here. And so starting from aggregated parts summary, we're going to click on this and then go to visualize. You notice that we have a couple options here. We have categorical plot from transform table because Quiver's chart cards, just like any other card, are going to require certain inputs and produce specific outputs. And so there's a special type of card for visualizations from a transform table. So we're going to select this one here. And so in the group by, we're going to be grouping by equipment name, group name. That was one of our aggregates. Now in this series, for our metric, instead of count, we're going to use max. And the property is going to be count. And now we're going to add another series here. So we're going to hit add series. And again, we're going to use max. And the property is going to be capacity. Now let's change up how this displays. So in the display section, we're going to change this to be grouped. Now let's update the categorical axis title to be output. And next we're going to tweak the value axis format to make the numbers more readable. So we're going to go to the cog, hit visual format, and then we're going to toggle on use groupings. Now we have commas, which makes the numbers easier to read. Now let's name this board. We're going to call this output by equipment. And now we're going to do something different here. We're going to add this to a dashboard. And so from here, we're going to hit this dashboard icon and hit add to dashboard, add to new dashboard. And now this card has been added to a dashboard, which we'll go spend more time with later. Now, next up, we're going to create a scatter chart to display part purity. And so we're going to be starting from the update part purity column card. So we're going to click on that. And then hit visualize, categorical plot from transform table. And we're going to be grouping by part production date. So let's change the bucketing of this date instead of week to months. And so for this series, we're going to make this average part purity, and we're going to segment by equipment name. And then you're going to see this error, time series axis only supported as horizontal axes. Note here that by default, the categorical axis is vertical. And so to fix this, we're going to go to display and then change the orientation to vertical. And we're going to change this to a scatter chart. And we're going to call the categorical axis part production date. And we're going to name the value axis part purity. And now let's add it to our dashboard. And so we're going to click the dashboard icon again, and then add to dashboard 1, which already exists. You don't need to add to a new dashboard. And now we're ready to move on to make a Vega chart. So we're actually going to be creating our Vega plot using the parts object set. So let's go all the way back up to that one. And so from parts, we'll click on it, go to visualize, and hit Vega plot. And so now let's do the configuration for our Vega chart. So in the editor text box, we're going to go change some values to get this to render. So first, in the encoding block, we're going to change the field. So we're going to delete where it says column X, and we're going to put in part type. And then we're going to update the title to be a part type. And then for Y, we're going to change this to part cost, and then the title to part cost. And now if we hit update, then this is now rendering properly as a box plot. Now, in order to better understand what this Vega plot is doing, let's take a look at the graph. And so in the graph, we can see, as expected, the Vega plot depends on parts. But you might be surprised to see that there's a transform table in the middle. So by invoking a Vega plot on the parts object set, Quiver automatically made us a transform table from parts because the Vega plot takes a transform table and produces a transform table. So now that we've produced all of our visualizations, we're ready to go configure our dashboard to make it user-friendly. So to navigate to your dashboard, you're going to go to Dashboards, and then go click Dashboard 1, which should be your only dashboard. And you can see that we have our 2 charts here, but we don't yet have our Vega chart. And so we can see it right here in the Add to Dashboard section. We'll click the 3 dots and hit Add to Dashboard. And so now we have our Vega chart there too. But let's give this a name. We'll call this Vega chart for cost. Now, here we are in our dashboard with our 3 charts. Note that we could have other cards other than charts in our dashboard. For example, we can have metric cards, we can have tables, we can have pivot tables. So you're really not just limited to charts here. So let's do some styling on our dashboard. So we're going to add a header by hovering above the chart. And here we have a text box. And we'll change from paragraph to large heading. So we're going to name this Equipment Analysis. Now note that you can also use these text boxes to add some annotation or observations throughout your dashboard. So next, we created a parameter a few steps ago to make our dashboard more usable. So now let's add that parameter in. So here, under the Add to Dashboard section, you can see that we have our parameter right here. So we're going to click on the 3 dots and hit Add to Dashboard. Now, if we scroll down, we can see that our parameter is all the way at the bottom. We might want it at the top. So we can drag it right below our title. And let's collapse this sidebar. And so from here, we're going to hit Publish. And I'm going to call this Equipment Analysis Dashboard. And then hit Save. And now from here, I can preview how this will look to end users. I can exit the preview. And I can copy this link from here to share with colleagues that have the appropriate permissions to the underlying data. Now that we've created a dashboard, there's other steps that we can take to make this more interoperable with other applications. For example, we're not going to do it right now, but we could add inputs and outputs to this dashboard so it can inherit inputs from whatever application or notepad it is in. Now from this point, we can integrate as many of these charts as we'd like into a notepad report for easy printing and emailing. And we can also embed this dashboard into a workshop application. For now, let's just demonstrate how to get some of these charts into a notepad document. So note that you can do this from the dashboard and from the analysis. From the dashboard, it would be a matter of clicking the 3 dots and hitting copy for notepad. From the analysis, we'll hit exit dashboard, and go to the canvas view, we can click the 3 dots and hit copy for Notepad, and then you can paste this into any sort of Notepad. So in summary, we started out with some object sets, did some data transformations, joins, filters, some data cleaning, and then made some visualizations. We also created and used a visual function, and then we put it all together in a dashboard. Thanks for watching. We hope you found this helpful. Be sure to let us know what you want to see next in the comments.